Whenever they were in a scene, we couldn't take our eyes away from them, and that is a sign of greatness. The Emmy for lead actress in a drama goes to Jodie Comer for Killing Eve.
And the Golden Globe goes to Sandra Oh!
This is Sandra Oh's second nomination and second win. She's winning her Golden Globe for her role of Eve Polastri in Killing Eve tonight.
I'm killing Eve!
Codenamed Villanelle, a thrilling novel by British author Luke Jennings, tells the story of Eve Polastri, an MI5 officer who gets recruited to investigate a female assassin named Villanelle. The two women engage in a fatal cat-and-mouse chase that fuels a homoerotic mutual obsession between each other. Codenamed Villanelle later served as the basis to the 2018 television series Killing Eve, starring the amazing Jodie Comer, the mother of all mothers Sandra Oh, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who at the time was better known for her work on Fleabag, was recruited to serve as the head writer and producer for the first season. Fun fact, I mistaked Phoebe Waller-Bridge with another artist who has the name Phoebe and Bridge in their last name. Anyway, Killing Eve first premiered on BBC America on April 8th, 2018, and it was an instant success. It broke ratings records, and it was the show that everyone was watching and talking about. Sandra and Jodie were even nominated for an Emmy and Golden Globe for their performances and won. Sandra won a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a TV Drama in 2019, and that year she made history as the first Asian woman to win in 39 years in the lead actress category. And Jodie won an Emmy that same year for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series. It really was history in the making. The series was a big deal. It was loved by critics and audiences until it wasn't. Many fans of the series can agree that there was a big decline in the writing after season 1 or 2 if you're not that picky. It was such a big decline that lesbians, aka the Killing Eve fanbase, would probably terrorize the writers with pitchforks if they could for that horrendous series finale. But we'll get into that later. Here's episode 1, season 1. The series opens in Vienna inside an ice cream shop. A woman is eating ice cream while having some kind of staring contest with a little girl or something. And at first the woman seems pretty normal, but then as the little girl exchanges a smile with that creepy ice cream shop guy, the woman identically mimics the ice cream shop guy's smile down to the crinkle in his eyes. And you know right then and there that there is something off about this woman. And to further prove my point, this woman, whose name we don't know yet, pulls something only Gru from the first Despicable Me would do, and knocks the ice cream into the little girl's lap, and she exits the restaurant with a smile.
Evil!
That entire scene made me so uncomfortable, and it's so unsettling, and it feels like it goes on forever. And honestly, I don't know if it's just Jodie Comer, but you can genuinely see a psychotic glimmer in her eyes. 10 out of 10, great character introduction. Boom, title card. In the next scene, we are introduced to Eve Polastri. Eve wakes up screaming and crying, and honestly saying waking up in the morning is terrifying. It turns out that Eve is not having a nightmare, but she just slept on both of her arms, scaring her husband Nico for no reason. Eve's weekend gets interrupted when she has to go into work at MI5. There's an important meeting going on with the head of the Russian desk at MI6, Carolyn Martins, played by the great Fiona Shaw, and her supervisor Frank and boss Bill. In the meeting, Carolyn reveals Victor Kendrin, a high-profile Russian politician, was assassinated in Vienna. He was leaving a sushi restaurant with his Polish girlfriend Kasia when his femoral artery was sliced open by the assassin without him or his girlfriend noticing, and bled for a couple of minutes before collapsing. And of course, Eve thinks this is very cool, and you know right there and then that there is something off about Eve. Eve's department gets assigned with protecting Kasia, who fled to London and is the only witness of the assassination. Eve is immediately intrigued by this case and believes the assassin is a woman. Because Kendrin was a known misogynist and sex trafficker, he may have not considered a passing woman a threat. She's so convinced by her theory that she is eager to meet Kasia and get more details about the killer through her.
Oh, the killer!
Bill tells Eve not to get involved and doesn't like what Eve is planning to do, since investigating more details about the assassin is unrelated to Eve's job. But Eve is literally the personification of poking your nose where it doesn't belong, and she does so anyway. This is yet another great character introduction because we find out that not only is Eve nosy, but she's incredibly smart, but she's also kind of a mess. We cut back to the ice cream shop girl, but this time she's in Paris, and she's actually blonde. In her apartment, she decides to play dead to scare this man that suddenly shows up to visit her. In this scene, we find out that her name is Villanelle and the man is Constantine, her handler. Villanelle keeps asking Constantine to watch a movie with her, and it's implied this is a common occurrence and that he always rejects her.
You are like Papa!
Constantine isn't there to hang out, but to assign Villanelle to her next job tomorrow in Tuscany. And what is Villanelle's job exactly? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. Villanelle decrypts the numbers of the Tuscany postcard she received, and we see your next target, Cesare Greco.
Nice face.
Every Killing Eve episode is named after a line said or written from that episode. Back at MA5, Bill tells Eve the CCTV footage has been found despite Carolyn stating earlier in the meeting that there was no CCTV. According to Bill, the CCTV footage shows that the assassin is a man and not a woman, which just prompts Eve to conduct an unauthorized interview with Kaja. Eve asks Kaja if the assassin was a man or a woman, but the Polish interpreter struggles to translate Kaja's response since Kaja is as high as a kite and is using slang. The only sentence that the interpreter is able to understand is that the assassin was a plank of wood. A plank of wood. After getting a clear answer, Eve leaves and sends Kaja to a facility to recover. Luckily for Eve, her Polish husband Nico and Dom, a Polish teenage boy who plays at Nico's bridge club, are able to decipher the slang Kaja is using to describe the assassin in the recording. He finds out that the assassin was tall, dark, and flat-chested like a plank of wood. Kaja calls the assassin a small-breasted psycho. If we rewind a little, Villanelle takes off a camisole that made her appear flat-chested, and she was also in Vienna being a menace. With this new information, Eve rushes off to call her assistant Elena and requests information on any active female assassins under the age of 45. Eve asks about one of the assassin's breast size, but they are too big for her to be the assassin. None of the women match the descriptions of the assassin. Villanelle is now in Tuscany, ready to end someone's life. By the way, Jodie actually climbed these drain pipes and performed most of her stunts in the show. Tom Cruise, you're finished. You're over. Villanelle infiltrates a villa where mafia boss Greco's birthday party is being held at. She convinces Greco's grandson to play a trick on him to lure Greco into the room. And this whole entire scene is so fun to watch because Villanelle is speaking Italian. Que bastardo. This is the third language Villanelle speaks in this episode. Villanelle successfully baits Greco into the room and aggressively pokes his eye with a poison hairpin, ending him on the spot. And this is simply iconic. The Italian music about family blaring in the background, Greco's family gathered outside to celebrate him, unaware that he's slowly dying in the other room. To me, this is cinema. And this is the first time we see Villanelle actually assassinate someone on screen, and it's in such a horrifying yet artful way. This could have easily been a generic kill, but no. The way Villanelle kills is a reflection of her character, at least in the beginning. And she is worth obsessing about. She's worth the chase and the danger that comes with it. In other words,
She's taking it.
she's taking it. Eve is back home, still impressed by how a tiny puncture wound killed Kendron. She makes a small cut on her own thigh and watches the blood in awe until Nico comes in with wine, and then Eve proceeds to ask him how he might kill her. Nico hesitates to answer at first and says he might push her down the stairs or flatter her to death, not taking the question seriously. Nico then asks Eve the same question since she's unsatisfied with his answer, and Eve proceeds to give the craziest response ever.
I'd paralyze you with saxitoxin and suffocate you in your sleep. Chop you into the smallest bits I could manage, boil you down, put you in a blender, then take you to work in a flask and flush you down a restaurant toilet.
If my spouse told me this, I would sleep with one eye open or run out of the house screaming for help because what the fuck? I know it's just the first episode, but these two are literally made for each other. The next day, Constantine tells Villanelle that her hairpin kill was a hit, and it's all over the press, which is a bad thing because Villanelle is supposed to be discreet with her work, and this is the second time she's messed up because she left a witness alive from her previous job. And who is this witness? Kaja, confirming that Villanelle is indeed Kendrick's killer. Okay, I'm going to stop pretending this is a mystery. I was just like, oh my god, Villanelle's the killer, but we all know she's the killer, okay? Anyway, Constantine tells Villanelle that she needs to end Kaja because she's going to be interviewed tomorrow as a witness to Kendrick's murder. So Villanelle is on her way to London. During lunch with Bill, Eve confesses that she interviewed Kaja and she has been compiling cases for months, including Greco's murder. She comes up with the theory that these murders are connected and they were done by a new prolific female assassin. She also thinks it's weird that there's suddenly CCTV footage of the assassin after she suggested the assassin was a woman, and she is certain someone is trying to cover things up. Bill thinks Eve is doing too much because she's bored and that her job and husband are boring. Very true. He reminds her that her job is just to keep Kaja safe and tells her to go to the hospital to make sure Kaja is safe and then go home. And Eve actually listens to him, but she brings Dom to the hospital with the intention of interviewing Kaja again. In the hospital, Eve goes to the restroom, and while she fixes her hair, Villanelle comes out of the stall dressed as a nurse.
Bitch!
Our two protagonists are finally face to face. Villanelle is immediately intrigued by Eve. She can't stop looking at her to the point that Eve notices and asks Villanelle if she's okay. Villanelle seems to be focused on Eve's hair, and as she walks out of the restroom, she tells Eve to wear it down, and Eve listens. In the toilet, Eve gets a call from Bill and informs Eve that there was no CCTV footage and that she needs to keep Kaja safe. But then Eve exits out of the restroom and she is met with a bloody mess. The nurses and officers guarding Kaja are all dead. Eve is screaming for help. Kaja herself is fighting for her life, but eventually dies, failing to tell Eve her last words. Thankfully, Dom is alive because he went to go get snacks. Back at MI5, Eve gets fired for conducting an illegal investigation, manipulating a witness, and putting a minor in danger. Eve literally had one job but failed. And even with all the events that happened that night, Eve is still fixated on the assassin being a woman. People died, Eve. Jesus. Bill also gets fired and leaves with Eve, and they both call Frank a D-swab. Later that night, Carolyn visits Eve and reveals that she and her team think the female assassin that Eve believes in has been active for 2 years across 10 countries and has been showing off lately. Carolyn invites Eve for breakfast the next day, which brings us into the next episode. Eve and Carolyn discuss more about Eve's background and why she's so interested in the female assassin. It turns out that Eve studied criminal psychology and has always been interested in what makes a woman able to kill. And this particular female assassin is interesting to her because she's outsmarting MI6, targeting influential people, and her kills have style, and that fascinates Eve. Carolyn is impressed by Eve and takes her to a rundown building where she has set up an official investigation on the female assassin. And she wants Eve to secretly run it, since Carolyn's department has no interest in investigating the female assassin. We are also introduced to Kenny, who is good with computers and is the one who has been gathering evidence. And all Carolyn is missing is someone to put the evidence together. Also, Carolyn said she had a team, but it's just Kenny and his computer. Anyway, Eve is allowed to recruit 2 people to help her, so she recruits her former boss Bill and assistant Elena, who has a girl crush on Carolyn. And now the whole team is assembled.
Assemble!
Back in Paris, Villanelle is wearing a pink dress and gets called in for an assessment because of what she did in London. Constantine told Villanelle to make Kaja's death look like a suicide, but she didn't listen.
Somebody help me!
In this scene, we learn that Villanelle works for an organization and that she does not like speaking Russian. Good excuse to not make the non-Russian actress speak Russian. And we also learned about Anna, a woman from Villanelle's past. Villanelle is asked if she still dreams about Anna, and her drawings of Anna are revealed. Notice how Anna's hair is dark and curly. I think she has a type. Villanelle denies that the women in her drawings are Anna and jokes that it's her mother. Based on her reaction to Anna, Villanelle fails her assessment. My question is why assassins would need to be assessed in the first place. I guess there's a such thing as being too crazy to be an assassin. But overall, I did enjoy this scene. I felt like we learned more about Villanelle and how emotionally indifferent she is towards the suffering of others. And we also see a very tiny glimpse of her past. She's charming and funny, but at the same time, so terrifying. Since Villanelle failed her assessment, she can't do any more work and argues with Constantine about letting her complete her next assignment. Constantine tells her it's too dangerous and that it's good to have someone looking out for her. Villanelle then hugs him, picking the Paris assignment postcard out of his pocket. As Constantine leaves, he tells Villanelle to go home and do something normal. And Villanelle does. She goes on a date with a Spanish guy, but I'm not covering this hetero shit. Back to Eve. Bill is being a hater and is all like, there is no proof that the same person committed these murders, there's no proof that it was a woman, and there's no proof that the murders are even connected. And there is no Queen of England. He also tells Eve that she can't lead the team purely on assumptions. And this gets Eve thinking, and when she's in the restroom trying to tie up her hair, she remembers the encounter she had with the nurse in the bathroom. She immediately asks Kenny for all the nurses' records from the hospital, any females worldwide aged 16 to 45 who have medical or prison records displaying violent and psychopathic traits. She notes that their profile of the female assassin is the only connection that they have to the people behind her. Y'all, she's getting so close. Villanelle attends the political fundraiser and pretends to be a waiter to get close to her target, Carla Demand, a perfume manufacturer. Villanelle purchased Carla under the pretense that she's a fan of hers who inspired her to make her own perfume, and she convinces Carla to smell the perfume she made. At first, Carla smells nothing, but then she starts coughing, wheezing, and she can't even properly beg for help. The perfume is poisonous and she dies. It's always so fun watching Villanelle dress up and act the house down for her assignments, speaking a different language or using a different accent, giving her character some background. It's just very entertaining to watch.
Bye-bye.
Frank the D-Swab had previously asked Elena to have a drink with him. Bill and Eve decided to join them in order to get some information about the CCTV. It turns out that Frank had lied about the CCTV because he didn't like that Bill and Eve were interfering with the investigation. When Villanelle returns home, Constantine is upset with her for assassinating Carla and threatens to cut her allowance in half. After things calm down for a moment, Villanelle threatens Constantine with a knife and asks him why he lied about there being security at the fundraiser. Constantine tells her she needs to be more subtle because there's a woman in London leading an investigation about her. This gets Villanelle visibly excited, almost like she's been wanting someone to catch her. Villanelle asks about the woman's name and Constantine tells her it's Eve Polastri. Also, the guy that Villanelle went on a date with dies because he smelled Villanelle's perfume, but who cares honestly, like I do not give a fuck. When Villanelle is alone, she searches for Eve Polastri. At the same time, Eve searches through the photos of the nurses from the hospital. Villanelle comes across an article on Nico's Bridge Club with a group picture where Eve appears in the back. Villanelle recognizes Eve from their encounter in the hospital's bathroom. None of the nurses seem familiar to Eve, and that's when she realizes that she's met the female assassin.
I think I've met her. Bitch!
I think what made season 1 so compelling in the first place was how carefully crafted the cat and mouse chase between Eve and Villanelle was set up. Every single detail mattered. Every single little thing that Eve did would lead her to Villanelle and vice versa, no matter how small the action was. Like Phoebe Waller-Bridge said, every moment in this show exists so that these two women can end up in a room together. By season 4, the writing isn't as focused on Eve and Villanelle's interesting relationship anymore. It becomes more focused on stopping the mysterious organization, the 12. And the whole 12 plotline was very anticlimactic. Another problem that this series suffered from is the change in head writers. Sure, it can be a very interesting concept to have different writers for each season, but I feel like that could only work with shows where each episode has a different storyline with different characters, but not with a series like Killing Eve that has established characters. It could lead to mischaracterization, and that's exactly what happened with Killing Eve, especially with Eve. In the first episode, we are literally told that Eve is bored with her life and she's seeking danger because it thrills her. And because of this, Eve's morality is always battling with her inner and darkest desires. And Villanelle is the only one that's able to give her that thrill that she's seeking for. But for some reason, the last head writer of the series, Laura Neal, believed that somehow Villanelle was some kind of nuisance to Eve. And by killing Villanelle, Eve was finally free. And that's a load of bullshit.
Why are you fucking with me? Why are you fucking with me? Why are you fucking with me?
If Eve wanted to be free from Villanelle, she would have stopped pursuing her and would have gone back to her normal life. She had many chances to quit, but she didn't because no matter how twisted it is, she's in love with Villanelle and Villanelle is in love with her. And Villanelle should have never died because there is no reason for Eve to keep going without Villanelle. And they should have killed Eve too because a life without Villanelle is not a life worth living.
When I try and think of my future, I just see your face over and over again.
It's a very beautiful face.
So in conclusion, Killing Eve should have been a limited series.